So when I was about 12 or 13 years old, I was part of the Scouts, and I remember going to Mount Washington. And we were at the base, and I remember going into Pinkham Notch, and we went in there to get the weather report, and they kind of said, hey, there's a good chance there could be bad weather. And for those who know, Mount Washington has some of the most extreme weather in the entire world. And at that point, about half the troop, half the parents, the ones that were wiser and smarter than probably us, decided that it just wasn't worth the risk. So we climbed up Tuckerman's Ravine, and as we got higher and higher, the weather got worse and worse. And eventually we got ourselves into a complete whiteout situation. Wind gusts that are 60, 70 miles per hour. We were not prepared. We did not have any high-end rain gear. It was mostly ponchos, which made us, some of the boys, especially the smaller ones, basically kites that were about to fly away. And the visibility was pretty much nil. Trails up there are marked by rock cairns, and that is about all you can really see. You're above the tree line, so you just kind of have to wander each direction to see where there's a pile of rocks. And when you see it, that's the way you go. You get to the next rock pile, and the visibility was so poor that we'd have to walk a few feet every direction just to figure out where we're going. Well, I'm still here, so obviously we made it. But one of the things that has lingered even more than what was certainly the most exciting hike of my young life was a video playing at Mount Washington Observatory called The Breakfast of Champions. This video was made by a few people who worked at Mount Washington at the time, and what just amazed me were the high winds that weren't part of some kind of hurricane or tornado, but just a regular day on the mountain. A mountain that isn't even that tall, but somehow has recorded more extreme weather than what can be found even on Mount Everest or in Antarctica. Anyway, I'll leave a link for the full video below, but it's definitely worth a watch for some vintage fun. Now, my memory, I guess, is a little bit off because even though I know it's the most challenging and the most difficult terrain, I go, hey, a 12 or 13-year-old went up Tuckerman's Ravine. I don't remember all the details of it, but I do know that I made it, and I made it back down. So I'm thinking, hey, here I am a grown man. I have a lot more experience. I have a lot better gear, and I should have no problem getting up there. But before I get too much into all my thoughts on the trail, let me just get to the video of the actual trail, and then afterwards I will share with you my thoughts on the trail, as well as maybe some of the mistakes or things I would have changed, and also the gear that I used, meals, etc. Same thing I always kind of go over. Anyway, here's the trail. What's up, David?
Nice.
Since the weather looks like it's going to be charming. Right on the top, either one. 30 pounds, 22 pounds.
One there.
Good thing we're going down.
Yeah, that was a lot more than I anticipated. I think every one of my days, I kind of routed out how many miles I thought I could do each day, and every day I had to give it a major haircut, whether it was just way, way, way too slow going, like going up Huntington Ravine, or the weather changed on us the next day with the thunderstorms rolling in and sleet, and it was just nuts. So we had to get down as fast as possible. So that shaved a few hours off our day. And then even the last day, I think that was the only day we actually stayed on trail the entire time and didn't cut any corners off. We should have definitely done a little bit more research on all the trails so we knew what we were in for. I probably still would have done Huntington Ravine because I take most reviews with a grain of salt, and people saying it's difficult and there's exposure and it's dangerous. I would have been like, whatever, still would have done it. But I think some of these trails, they would have said it's a lot more enjoyable this direction rather than that direction, like only go up on it or only go down on it or whatever it may be. I think that would have made the loop a lot better for me. I also would have probably come a day earlier rather than trying to drive up in the morning. That way I would have had more time in the morning to do Huntington Ravine and summit Mount Washington. Not doing Mount Washington with our trip here and this hike here definitely was a bit of a downer. It happened. We were really close to the top, but we just didn't have the daylight for the extra hour or 2 hours it would have taken for us to get all the way to the top. So not only was this a really tough hike on my body, I also had a tough time with my camera. Within the first maybe mile of the hike, I did not lock one of my tripod legs all the way down, and it took a digger right into a pointy rock. So it was really a bummer because I didn't have any backup lenses, and for the entire rest of the hike, I wasn't sure if things were really focused or not, considering my lens was always kind of like a little bit pushed in on one side. I had to keep trying to pop it out, and it became a very expensive trip because of my broken lens. Then on top of that, I seemed to have all types of issues with my sunglasses. I left them behind. I dropped them in the water. I found them in the water. One of my arms on it fell off. I crashed my drone. That was a mess. I got nothing. I don't know. So I'm going to try to make it pretty quick on the gear I used on this trail. I did use the Z-Packs Free Duo tent. This was the first time I actually used it in the rain. It acted exactly the way it's supposed to. It kept me dry, but since it's a single wall tent, it did have a lot of condensation on the inside of it. So if you're a little bit taller like I am, or maybe if you're not on the flat ground like I wasn't, and you start sliding down one direction or the other, and your feet start touching the walls, or your head starts touching the walls, it's going to get a little bit wet. Now, the other thing that I used on this trail, this was my second hike with Dave that was an overnight hike. And last time I used like a single person little stove, and it just didn't really work out really well. So this time I brought the Covea spider stove, and I used an MSR big kettle, and I also had a couple Snow Peak titanium bowls all in there. Now the whole kit all together actually weighed about the same as my single person cooking setup. Difference is it was a lot bulkier, so a lot bigger kit. So that, yeah, worked out nice rather than having to boil it 2, maybe even 3 times when we were eating with just a single person kit. This is very compact and lightweight, and it doesn't take up any space, which is fantastic. But for 2 people, it just really wasn't great. So I kind of been working through this whole Injinji darn tough sock issue. The balls of my feet still just don't like the Injinji socks. I don't know what it is about them, but they just seem to get rubbed raw. But on the darn tough socks, don't have any problems on the ball of my feet at all. But then my toes rub together and I get blisters between my toes. So I had both sets of socks for this hike. I started with the darn tough, I moved to the Injinji the next day, and I moved back to the darn tough. It seemed to kind of work, but I did actually find some Injinji liner socks that I'm gonna try to use on the inside of my darn tough socks for the next time. And I'm hoping that is the solution I'm looking for. We'll find out. Now the Ultra Lone Peak, I don't know if they were necessarily the right shoes for this hike. There was just so much flex in the sole. My feet were just tired. They were just really tired after each day. I don't know where I'm gonna go from here, but I feel like I need to find some kind of shoe that has a little bit more of a substantial sole going forward. I'm still really happy with them, and overall, my ankles and my knees seem to really like them, but I feel like I need something maybe a little bit more substantial when I've got terrain as difficult and challenging as what I was just on. I packed a lot of food and it was all gone by the time I was done. Somehow I managed to consume almost double what Dave consumed, but that's just what I do. I graze the entire time. I never felt hungry. I'm one of those guys that somehow will gain weight through a trip like this. So overall, I think this was a really fun hike, and I would highly recommend it if it wasn't during COVID. The huts are actually open on the tops of these mountains, and that would be really, really nice to not have to pack food, and you actually have a lot better shelter and maybe some camaraderie talking to some people who are doing the same thing as you. The camping wasn't bad. It was totally acceptable and fine and free, so you can't beat that. I do think that I would probably pick a different route than what I did. And the other routes that would probably be really high on my list would try to be doing the Presidential Traverse, which goes right along the ridge line. I think that'd be pretty cool. Or maybe tying in something with Tuckerman's Ravine and then just figuring out a better way to loop back down than what I did. I think sporadically just choosing trails, although it worked and it was an adventure and we really had no idea what we were in for, probably was not the best decision that we made. So if you have any other suggested loops or trails that I need to go do in the White Mountains, let me know. I definitely plan on going back there in the very near future, and hopefully I'll do a better job planning ahead of time. And if you have any other questions or comments about the trail, go ahead and let me know below. I'll do the best I can to answer them. I'm by far not an expert there, but I have made some pretty good mistakes at this point, and I might be able to help you not make the same mistakes that I made up there. Anyway, until next time, get out there and just do more. See ya. Bye.